My guest this week is an author, a speaker, and a one-woman shower. That's something, right? Her new book, A Carlin Home Companion, tells her journey growing up as the daughter of George and Brenda Carlin. She's also my friend and throws a hell of a party. Kelly Carlin, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. This is so fabulous.
Doesn't this seem more mature than anything we've done together?
We are so grown up right now. It's kind of scaring me.
This is very grown up.
It is.
Before we start, you just pointed to our
I'm like, where are we looking out at?
So this picture, in case now I know we're blowing the illusion
of
television, but that is a picture. It's not an actual window. That is the Upper West Side. That's 89th Street, facing north.
All right.
And just a little bit past where this picture ends is actually just in the last year a street that is now named after your father. This isn't where I was intending to start with, but let's start there. Your dad now has a street.
Yes, he has officially a street at 121st in Amsterdam. We wanted it to be between Broadway and Amsterdam, but and that was the block he grew up on.
Yeah.
But there's also a church there. The church his mother attended, the church that had the school that he attended as a child.
He was kicked out of that church, right? Or he was kicked out of the school?
Well, he was kicked out of the school, and then he was allowed to come back to graduate for 8th grade, but he had to write the play in order to get back in, which they were great. It was actually a very progressive school for a Catholic school. But the irony is that once we wanted to name the street, the church got all up in arms about it, worried. Well, they claimed that they were worried about kids coming out of school and looking up and seeing the name and then Googling it and finding out about the 7 dirty words. That was their concern.
Right. Also not a huge fan of religion,
I'm guessing they were more worried about the religion is bullshit video that they would probably find on YouTube.
Yeah. Video, there must be 50 of those.
There is, probably is, yeah. We're working on that. We're trying to, organize all of that. But you can go to 121st in Amsterdam on the other side of the street, and there is George Carlin Way.
Right. So just to be clear, so it's on the same street, but they just pushed it one block.
Yeah, they just put it across the street on Amsterdam because, I mean, it's one of those. Just the thing. Churches have these lines that they draw, and they're ridiculous. But the good news was that when all this went down, it got us so much press that it ended up being like a kind of a funny thing. They actually got us more attention for the street sign than I think they probably would have wanted.
Yeah, although every comic in the world wanted to be there that day, and you had a zillion.
Yeah, it was great.
You had a zillion.
It was an amazing day. And Kevin Bartini, the comic, he's the one who initiated it and did it all. But yeah, we had Colin Quinn and Dave Attell and it was a great day.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that what I'm putting right here, we did this because I used to live on the Upper West, so it's a nice way to start.
I feel at home.
Yeah. So as I said in my intro, one of the things that I love about having you here, and we've been doing this kind of stuff forever, but one of the reasons that I think it's particularly apropos now, beyond just your book, is that all of the things that your dad stood for, I think are really coming to fruition right now. There's something culturally. Again, right.
It's a cyclical thing.
Yeah, it's like this endless thing, but I feel like there's a moment now between religion and political correctness and free speech, these things that he railed on more than anybody and did better than anybody, they're all coming back right now. So before we get into that, let's do something a little bit, we'll give him a little hint from the book. Give me something about your dad on the private side, because this is someone who talked about culture, not necessarily talked about himself. So let's just do a little of that.
Yeah, he was one of those comics, which really didn't come to me until he died, really, but who really did focus on, he talked about 3 things he focused on. The little things that we all share. So that was the observational humor stuff and the refrigerator man and the airline announcements and things like that. He focused on language, which is another thing that we all share as a culture. And then he would go after the big subjects, death, religion, children, things like that. But he mentioned me once in a routine in 1971. Yeah. It was one of the earlier albums where I was very excited. He was talking about euphemisms for shit. We call it number 2 and P is number 1, and how once I figured that out, I made funny combinations up and things like that.
Right.
And that was the only time I was ever talked about. And for comics, 99% of the time, their material is their family and their personal life. So My dad was very different than that, and he didn't. And he wrote a memoir, but he didn't publish it until we published it after he died.
Yeah.
So.
What do you think that was about? Because he so got into the mind. He so got into the very bit of us that we all share. And yet that part he did keep. Was that out of respect maybe to your mom or to your family? Or
I don't know. I don't know. I think his mind just didn't travel there. His mind was out here. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way his focus was. And so it was kind of weird because growing up, I would see other comedians talking about their families. And it did hit me a few times, especially in like teenage years, like, well, why doesn't he ever talk about us on like the Tonight Show? I mean, I remember one time he went on the Tonight Show with Carson as the host, and Carson asked about his family, and he had these funny made-up sons that he talked about. D'Artagnan was one of them, which, I mean, it was a great bit.
Yeah.
But
Did you feel jealous,
felt a little. No, I already felt a little invisible.
Yeah.
Therefore, I felt even a little more invisible at that time.
Yeah.
And yet, I think I'm happy about it because my life wasn't fodder for his comedy, whereas my poor dad, our life together has become fodder for my art. So,
sure.
Which was a bone of contention for us, and I do talk about that in the book, and not so much as artists, but that there were some things that we had never talked about as a family that I really was willing to talk about on stage. Mm-hmm. Like people like Spalding Gray and Sandra Singh Lowe and these other solo artists did. They go out, and comedians.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of comedians are way more comfortable going on stage talking about their life there than having to go home and having a serious conversation with their loved ones.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the sad clown thing in a little bit. But you do address that. You do address that in your one-woman show that was sort of a lead-up to the book, that there's a sort of beautiful moment where you and your dad are talking, and there was like a little bit of sense of betrayal or a sense that he was going to be exposed in a way that he hadn't done.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, I mean, what happened was I wrote a solo show, and I sent him the script, and inside the script, I talked about having some negative feelings about when my mother was dying and he had to go on the road. And it was a conversation my dad and I had never had, and we didn't have any real healthy conversation closure around it. But And I looking back on it now, I think sending him that script was my way of saying, hey, I have these feelings.
Right.
But this was one of the themes I wanted to work on in the book, was that here's this man who is the truth teller, like you said at opening in the show. I mean, this is the man who conquered everything and was fearless and would talk about all the big stuff that our culture does not want to talk about on stage. And yet when it came to our family, we were very much the textbook dysfunctional, alcoholic family that did a lot of walking on eggshells, didn't do a lot of intimate talking about the issues, and we all pretended that we was fine. You know, we all walked around.
So the true all-American family.
Yeah, truly. And that's,
in that regard.
And that's like when people talk about my book and they're like, you know, you have such a unique life. I'm like, yeah, kind of not. I mean, I did.
Yeah.
But kind of like the all-American family, yeah.
All right, so I don't want to delve too deep into the book because I want people to buy the book.
Yes, of course.
So that's an important piece of this. But just one more thing on that. Did you have a sense when you were growing up? Now, your dad, look, there were drug things that you talk about in the book and in the show. Arrests, you know, he was arrested the night that Lenny Bruce was arrested, right? Is that?
Yeah, that was before I was born.
Right,
that was 61.
But these
yes,
types of things that were going on.
He was on the front lines,
so
as they say.
How much of that were you conscious, especially in your early years, that your dad really was this legend? I mean, when there's the Mount Rushmore of comedy, it's, you know, half the people say it's your dad, half the people say it's Pryor, and then maybe there's 1% that gets split amongst Lenny Bruce and a couple others.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the legend kind of Mount Rushmore thing really happened more when I was in my 20s, and I was at an English class at UCLA, and my professor says, you know, we're going to study compare and contrast essays today, and I have a perfect example of how you should go about this. And he pushes the play button on a boombox, and my dad's baseball football routine comes out. And I'm sitting there in this class of like 25 people looking around going, is anyone else having this weird experience?
Right. Are you going to play any shit from anyone else's dad, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that's when you realize, oh, yeah, big dent in the culture has happened here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it was from that point on that I knew, like, legend. But even before that, I knew that he was obviously famous and people worshipped him and all that kind of stuff. And was around for, you know, an arrest or two of his also. So I knew he was definitely on the front lines of something.